We're going to pick up on a conversation that we started on Wednesday. We had to interrupt it, unfortunately, because there were developments around that fire in the centre of Johannesburg. Now, we were talking about how artificial intelligence and the Internet of Things is going to impact how we actually come into the fourth industrial revolution. And how will this impact our lives? And also, what about the traditional sectors such as transport? What will happen with rail? And that's the conversation we were having. The South African Heavy Haul Association is bringing together, or at least they brought together this past week from across Africa, a whole lot of people, stakeholders, to look at the future of the continent's railways. And that, of course, concluded yesterday. And we are joined now by Brian Monakali. And Brian, of course, is the chairperson of the South African Heavy Haul Association, also the International Heavy Haul Association, and he's a general manager of capital planning at Transnet Freight Rail. Brian, thanks so much for coming back.
Thank you. Good evening, Sakina. Good evening to the viewers as well.
So the conference has concluded. Anything noteworthy that you guys have resolved as a group to come out of this particular conference?
Yes, there's quite a lot of things that we've agreed on. Firstly, I think one of the main objectives of the conference was to try and unpack some of the fourth industrial revolution solutions, to try and make a meaning in terms of what are the opportunities for application within the railway industry. Because we all do know if we do nothing about it and be more proactive in terms of your approach, then we could be disrupted. So we've managed to unpack some of those and managed to find to establish opportunities where we can apply these solutions within our railways. We had international speakers that also came to share what is happening worldwide as far as the space of the fourth industrial revolution. But most importantly, we've managed to come up with a way forward. We had about 12 railway organizations that were represented at this conference, coming from the Southern African region. So they were here. And the main outcome of that was that we managed to sign an MOU between the Southern African Railway Association and also the South African Heavy Haul Association. So we've signed an MOU of collaboration between the two organizations.
What will that entail?
So that will, firstly, a bit of a context. The Southern African Railway Association has got the Southern African Railway Organization that are part of that. They've been members of that association for some time. So they look at strategic issues, at policy, also the political aspects get brought in through the ministers to discuss some of the aspects that are impacting trade amongst these countries. So that has been done over the past years, and meaningful strides have been taken in that aspect. So now the next level now is the technical. So we are saying, how do we revive the technical chapter of the Southern African Railways so that we're getting more organized as a railway industry? So what that entails is that between these two organizations, they're going to work together to try firstly to define what the roadmap should be of the railways of the future. We call it the 2030 vision. What's the roadmap is going to be? How do you make sure that we are proactive and define what you want to do in the future? And most importantly, how do we take the best practice that we have across the world? As you know, Transnet is a member of the International Heavy Haul Association. We're currently chairing the chapter of the International Heavy Haul Association, which got members of the countries such as Australia, Russia, USA, Brazil. This is an organization that has been in existence over the past 4 years, looking at technical advancement, improving operations and safety. So we want to bring that best practice as well, so that it can be applied throughout the African railways.
Brian, you touched on the political aspects of this, and we know that Transnet, you haven't escaped much scrutiny here at home, and I would imagine that everybody across the continent and the world is watching what is happening in South Africa. There was talk of 1,064 locomotives that Transnet had bought. There was problems with the specifications on those locomotives. Whatever happened to those?
Well, I'm sorry, I'm not. I'm definitely not the spokesperson for Transnet, and I don't think I'll be the appropriate person to comment on that.
But I do believe that, you know, as one of the general managers there, you hold quite a senior position.
That's correct.
And if you were talking to us about heavy haul freight across the continent, then surely, you know, those sort of issues come into play, because which locomotives are you going to send across the continent?
No, well, if you talk about the technical aspects of the project, there isn't a major problem that relates to the technical aspects of the project. I mean, we've been doing this work. Transnet is an organization that has been there for a number of years.
But will those locomotives, will they form part of what this offering will be?
Well, maybe Sakina, let me repeat. I'm not necessarily the spokesperson of what Transnet is going to be doing with the locomotives. I don't think I'll be an appropriate person to comment on that. But what I can comment on is that the solutions, the technical solutions that are within the rail network that Transnet is actually expanding on, that is within the rolling stock that gets bought by Transnet, I can assure you the technical aspects are actually correct. Why I'm saying that is that, as I've mentioned to you, if I put the head of the global organization such as the International Heavy Haul Association, Transnet has had access to the best practice right across the world. Access of what's happening in terms of rolling stock in China, Russia, USA, and so on and so on. So from the point of view of technical aspects in that regard, so they are far advanced. They're far more advanced.
But it is scant comfort when you are not willing to go into, you know, the detail here, given that you are the general manager of capital planning at Transnet Freight Rail. So if anyone should know, you, Brian, are the person who should know whether any of that fleet will form part of what you are trying to do here across the continent.
Yes, definitely. When it comes to technical advancements, remember, I'm talking from an industry point of view now. So when it comes from the technical advancements of within the assets that we have, which includes the rolling stock, which includes the same rolling stock you are talking about. So there's a drive within the industry to make sure that we can bring about technologies, we can bring about innovations, including those assets that you're talking about right across, as well as the network, the rail network that we currently having. We're looking at applying these fourth industrial revolution solutions to make sure that they can be run in the network in the most efficient way.
But how are we going to do that if it's easier to get stuff to London, as they say, than to the north of the continent?
That's exactly the problem we're trying to address with the MOU that we've just established. Because we are saying railways in Africa were not designed or constructed in the way that promotes trade amongst the African countries. This is a legacy issue. So, and one of the problems is that the existing network, especially in the rest of the African countries, the condition is not good, it's poor. And therefore, it doesn't promote the intra-trade amongst the countries. So that's why we had to sign this MOU, because we are saying we need collaboration. There's no country that can do it on its own. If we want to actually address exactly what you've just explained, we need to work together. We need to put together the technical minds that say, how do we take the best practice that we've seen across the world? You know, in the case of Europe, there's seamless running of trains right across. You can move from one end of the continent to another easily with on the train. But it's not the case for years. So those are the challenges that we want to address. And a big portion of the problem is technical challenges, such as standards, such as solutions that we've
Well, Brian, thanks so much for coming back. And of course, we'll be keeping beady eyes on these developments. Brian Monakali from Transnet Freight Rail, and also talking to us there about a conference that has just concluded here in Johannesburg. Well, we're going to